In this video by MTX Tutors, we're going to learn trigonometry. Specifically, we will see how we can work with trigonometry without using the calculator. This first exercise asks for us to calculate the value of x. We have this triangle with 30 degrees, and we're given the value of 12 as the hypotenuse. We can easily check that x is the side of the opposite side of the angle. So the trigonometry relation that we have to use is going to be sine. The sine, if you remember, works like this. So one thing we can do is cross out the element that we want to find, and then this tells us that we have to multiply the sine with the hypotenuse, and this will give us the result of the opposite side. So let's do that. X is going to be the sine of 30 times the hypotenuse. The hypotenuse, we know, measures 12 centimeters. So we have the sine of 30 times 12 centimeters. Now the sine of 30 is one of those trigonometric relations that we have to memorize, and it is equal to 0.5 or 1/2. So 0.5 times 12 centimeters. This is very easy to calculate. It gives us 6 centimeters. So with this, we have solved this first exercise that tells us that x measures 6 centimeters. The following is actually quite similar. We are now asked to calculate the value of x, but x is the hypotenuse of the triangle. This triangle has an angle of 60 degrees, and the bottom side measures 6.5 centimeters. So this side here will be the opposite, and so 6.5 is going to be the adjacent. Now, because we are interested in the hypotenuse and we have the adjacent, we're going to use the cosine. The triangle for the cosine was like this. So given that we want to calculate the hypotenuse, we will cross it out, and this tells us that the hypotenuse is going to be the adjacent side divided by the cosine of the angle. The adjacent side measures 6.5 centimeters. And the cosine of 60 is another one of those trigonometric relations that we have to memorize. It is equal to 0.5. So what we can do to calculate this is multiply everything by 2. So we can multiply 6.5 times 2 and 0.5 times 2. This will give us 13 is 6.5 times 2 divided by 1, because 1 is 0.5 times 2. And so the answer is going to be 13. So the hypotenuse measures 13 centimeters. Pause the video and try and solve these two exercises yourself. In a few seconds, I will solve the exercise to show you how it's done. In this first one, we have x, that is the hypotenuse, and the side that we're given is the opposite. So the opposite and the hypotenuse are related with the sine. So if I cross out the hypotenuse, that is the value that we want to find, we get that we have to solve the opposite divided by the sine of 30. So the hypotenuse is going to be the opposite divided by the sine of 30. The opposite side measures 9 centimeters, and the sine of 30 is again one of the ones that we have to know, 0.5. So like before, we will multiply both numbers by 2, and this gives us 9 times 2 is 18, divided by 0.5 times 2 is 1. So the answer is 18. And now let's have a look at the other one. Now we're given the hypotenuse, and if this side is the opposite, then x is the adjacent. Whenever we have the hypotenuse and the adjacent side, we have to use the cosine. Given that we have to find the adjacent side, we cross this in the triangle, and this tells us that we have to multiply the cosine times the hypotenuse. So x is going to be cosine of 60 times the hypotenuse, 15 centimeters. Like before, cosine of 60 is 0.5. And so multiplying by 0.5 is the same as dividing by 2. So 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. And that is the value of x. Now we have a problem that can be a bit more complicated. We don't know what the angle is, but all we know is that the tangent of that angle is 0.6. And we're asked to calculate what is the length of AB. So if this side is AB, I have to calculate this x. And for this triangle with this angle, this is the opposite. And this side here will be the adjacent. So if you remember, the triangle for the tangent was like this. We want to find the opposite, so we cross it out here. And this tells us that we have to do the tangent of x multiplied by the adjacent, that is 40 centimeters. But now tangent of x is 0.6. And 0.6 times 40 is 24. So this tells us that this side measures 24 centimeters. Then we have this other very similar problem. We don't know the angle, but we know that the cosine of that angle is 0.3. And we're asked to calculate the length of BC. BC is this side here. So for this triangle, this is the opposite, and so x is going to be the adjacent side, and 6.4 is going to be the hypotenuse. So we don't care about the opposite, only we care about is the hypotenuse and the adjacent. So we know that we will have to use the cosine. If x is the adjacent, we cross it out, and this tells us that we have to do cosine of x multiplied by the hypotenuse. The cosine of x is 0.3, and this gives us 1.92. So x is 1.92 centimeters. Now pause the video and try and solve these two exercises yourself. I will now give you the solution to these two problems. We again don't know what the angle is, but we know that the tangent of this angle is 0.8. For this triangle, this side is the opposite and 30 centimeters is the adjacent. We have to calculate AB, so we have to calculate the opposite. And if we remember, tangent related the opposite with the adjacent. So given that we want to find the opposite, we cross it out, and all we have to do is multiply the tangent with the adjacent. The tangent of x times the adjacent is going to be 0.8 times 30, and this is also 24. So the opposite side measures 24 centimeters. Similarly, for this other one, we don't know the value of x, and we have to calculate AB. Just ignore this one. AB is again the opposite, and we know the hypotenuse. So for hypotenuse and opposite, we use the sine. Given that we want to calculate the opposite, we cross this one out, and it tells us that the solution will be multiplying the sine of the angle times the hypotenuse. The sine is 0.9 and the hypotenuse is 15 centimeters. This gives us 13.5. So AB, or the opposite side, measures 13.5 centimeters. Finally, let's solve this other exercise. We again don't know the angle, but we know that its cosine is 0.2. And we have to calculate the length of AC. AC is the hypotenuse, and 10 centimeters is the value of the adjacent side. So, to relate these two values, we use the cosine. We want to calculate the hypotenuse, so we cross this one out, and we get that it's going to be adjacent divided by the cosine. The adjacent is 10 centimeters and the cosine is 0.2. So what we can do now is multiply everything by 10, because we want to get an integer in the denominator so that we can actually do the calculation. 0.2 times 10 is 2, and 10 times 10 is 100. Now this calculation is easy to do. 100 divided by 2 is 50. So this tells us that the hypotenuse measures 50 centimeters. With this, we finish this video. If you want to learn more about MDX tutors, make sure you check out our website.